Hi, hello, vanakkam, and welcome to yet another episode on Little Slaw YouTube channel. So far, in our previous days, in our previous videos, we were seeing about the various logical controllers that we use in JMeter. Like we have seen about the if controller, the while, the loop controller, simple and transaction controller, random controller, once only controller, and interleave controller. So today, what are we going to see? So we are going to see about the random order controller. So the name might be similar to the random controller, but we'll see what is the difference between the random controller and the random order controller along with the various other controllers. So before we dive in, I once again welcome you all to Little Slaw YouTube channel. This is me, Vasan Shanmugam. I request you all to subscribe to our channel if you have not subscribed yet. Like my videos, share the videos with your friends, comment your questions and your feedback in the comment section. So with no delays, let's go to the video. So first let's see what is a random order controller. And before that, let's see how to add a random order controller. So to add a random order controller, we need a thread group. So I'm adding a thread group here. And then we'll add a random order controller under the logic controller by right clicking on the thread group, and then to add, and then the logic controller, and then the random order controller. And how to add the requests under the random order controller. So this is similar to the other controllers where we can either record a script or we can move the script or we can go to add to the sampler and then the HTTP request. So we'll add 3 requests to have a demo. Let me remove this. We'll add 3 different HTTP requests. And to see how do they work, we will need to have a listener. So we'll add a view results tree under the listener part. So we have 3 requests under the random order controller, and we will see how do they execute. And before we see that, let's see what is a random order controller. So the random order controller is much like a simple controller in that it will execute each child element at most once, but the order of execution of the nodes will be random. So this is similar to a simple controller, but the order of the execution will be random. So let's execute and see how does this random order controller works. Let's go to the view results tree and we'll execute. And before that, let's check the thread group. So we have one user with one iteration. Let's execute the script. So here we could see all the 3 requests has got executed, but as I told you earlier, they execute in a different manner, which is they execute in a random fashion. So instead of the first request, we could see the second request has got executed, and then the first request, and then the third request. So let's now increase the loop count and see whether they follow the randomness in the different iteration. So this will give us an idea about what pattern do they follow. So let me clear this for now and let's execute the same random order controller with 2 threads, with 2 iterations. So here we could see the first iteration went with third request, first request and second request, and the second iteration went with third request, second request and the first request. So for each of the iteration, the order gets changed. Let's add one more iteration and see whether they follow any other similar pattern. So here we could see the order as requested has got accessed in a 3 2 1, and then it is 1 3 2 and 2 1 3. So even requesting 3 iterations with 3 requests do not follow the same pattern. So let's make a small change. So what we'll do is, instead of increasing the iteration, let's increase the thread count. So we have two users who have single iteration, and let's see whether they follow a similar pattern in the randomness. So here we could see sometimes they follow the same pattern. So for the first user, we could see it works as first request, third request, and second request. And again, for the second user, it again has the same setup, which is first user, third user, and second user. So let's execute one more and see whether they maintain the consistency. So the second test, we could see there is a randomness that is happening. So for the first user, it went like third request, first request, second request. And for the second user, it went like second request, first request, and third request. So since it was random, it has got executed similarly for such iteration. So let's increase the user thread to 3 with one iteration, and let's see whether they follow any similar pattern. So sometimes, yes, they do follow the similar pattern for different users, since we have got only 3 requests. If in case we have more than 5 to 10 requests, and if we have more iterations, they do, even for any number of requests and even for any number of threads, they follow a different random order of execution. So let's make a quick change. So we will increase the loop count and see how do they work. So anywhere the test follows the random order, but since again 1 2 3 is also a random request, so even that also works sometimes, that we could see 1 2 3 and 2 3, and again the second request and the third request comes in, so they started to execute in a different manner. But any request that comes under random controller will get executed, will execute all the 3 requests. So without any doubt, we can confirm that any request that comes under the random order controller will get executed. But the only thing which we have to remember is they execute in a random order and not in a sequential order like we do in a simple controller. So now let's see the differences between the random order controller and our other controllers, other logical controllers we have. So let me duplicate this for now, and we will change this controller to a simple controller. So now we have got a simple controller, and let's see how does this work, and we'll see what is the difference between the random order controller and the simple controller. So we'll change this names to simple controller so that we can easily understand while they execute. So now we have simple controller, and under that we have 3 requests, and under random controller we have 3 different requests. And the thread group, we have one user with one thread. So let us execute it now to see how do they execute. So the random controllers, they execute in a random fashion. So we have 2 3 1, but the simple controller, they work in the sequential order from the top to bottom. So we could see first, second, and third. So let's increase the loop count to 2 and see how do they work. So again, we could see in the random order controller, we could see it is 1 3 2, and then the simple controller with 1 2 3, and then again the random controller kicks in, random order controller kicks in with 3 2 1, and then the simple controller again with the sequential order with 1 2 and 3. So let's now change the simple controller to a different logical controller. So we have see about the interleave controller in one of our previous videos. So we'll see how does this interleave controller works. Let me change the name for better understanding. So we have interleave controller as the logic controller, as the parent controller for these 3 requests, and let us execute them. So again we'll make it as one thread with one loop count, and let me execute it. So here we could see The random order controller executes all the requests but in a random fashion, but the interleave controller has executed the first request, that is in a sequential order, which is from the top to bottom, so it has executed only once. So let's make it to 2 and see how does this iteration or this test works. So here we could see again the random order controller has executed all the 3 requests in a random fashion, and the interleave controller has executed with one iteration, with one request for the first iteration and second request for the second iteration. So let's increase it to 3, just one more we'll add, and then let's see how does this work. So again it is similar, it is same that what we expect in the random order controller. And again for the interleave controller, we have got executed all the 3 requests since we have got 3 different iterations. So let's now change this interleave controller to a different controller. We will bring in once only controller, which we have seen earlier in our videos. So I'll add once only controller, and let's change the name as well to have better understanding and to remember what request is getting executed. So now we have got the random order controller and the once only controller. So let's make a change in the thread group. So we have one thread with one loop count. So now we have got one thread with one loop count, and let's execute this test and see how do they execute. So now we could see the random order controller in a random fashion. They choose 1, 2 and 3, and the once only controller has executed all the requests. Yes, since we have only one iteration, but still once only controller executed all the requests but only once. So let's confirm that. So I'll go to the thread group. We will increase the load or the loop count to 2, and we will execute again. So here we could see the random order controller has got executed twice, but the once only controller has got executed only once. And that's how the once only controller works, but still they execute all the requests, but it's only once, which is once only controller. But the random order controller executes the number of iterations that are given in the thread group, but they execute in a random fashion. So let's now bring in the random controller and see what's the difference between the random controller and the random order controller. So let me change the name to random controller. So here we have random controller and the random order controller. So let's see the difference now. So now we have the random order controller and the random controller. We will keep the iteration to 1 to start in the scratch. So let's execute and see how does this random order controller and the random controller works. So we have one user with one thread. So here we could see in the random order controller, all the requests has got executed, but in a random fashion. And in the random controller, it is only one request that has got executed, and again that too in a random fashion. So that's the difference between the random controller and the random order controller. Let us bring in 2 iterations and see how do they work. So here we could see in the first iteration, the random order controller executes all the requests but in a random fashion. Again, the random controller executes in a random fashion, but it's just only one request. So it is similar to the random. So random controller is something, or they execute in a random fashion, but they execute only one request for inside it, which is similar to a interleave controller. So it's a mix of a simple controller, or I could say it's a mix of a interleave and a sample, but again it takes the property from the random controller. So again we could see it executes the first request here and the third request here. Let's now make it to 3 iterations and see how do they work. So finally, all the three requests in the random controller has got executed in the three iterations. So the random controller takes all the requests to get executed in a random fashion, but again, they execute only one request in their iteration, but the random order controller executes all the requests but in a random fashion. Let's see whether we could or we can try with some other controllers. So we have tried with Interleave, we have tried with once only, we have tried with random, and then finally it is random order controller. So let's try one more with the loop controller to see how does this work, in what order do they execute, whether they follow the interleave or whether they follow the random or whether they follow this simple. So let's make a simple check, or let's make a simple comparison. So here we have one with one iteration, and under the loop count let's make it to 2, and let's see how does this work. So here we could see under the random controller we could see all the requests have got executed in a random fashion, and for the loop controller they have got executed like what we have in the simple controller. So they all execute in the sequential order, which is from the top to bottom, but they work on the number of iterations what we have mentioned inside the thread group or inside the loop controller. So let's increase the thread group to 2 and see how does this work. So now we are running this, and here we could see, since we have two thread group, so we could see multiple requests for the random controller, that is two users have kicked in, and then again for the loop controller it is two users who execute twice the loop. So that is the difference between the logical controller, that is the random order controller, and various other controllers. Like what we have checked so far is the loop controller or the once only or the interleave or the random or the random order controller, the simple controller. So if you have any queries or any doubts on the previous other controllers, you can check my previous videos. So with that we come to an end. I believe this video would be very useful to you. Please do follow our channel, subscribe to our channel, like the videos, share the videos with your friends, and till we meet in our next video, it's bye bye from Vasant Shanmugam and Little's Law.